Greetings, kids. Sean here, mostly metal. Before we get into this heavy-ish topic, I wanted to bring this album up again. Father of Death by Elegiac. I mentioned it in one of my previous videos, and I kind of poo-pooed it a little bit. But I've been listening to it a lot more over the last couple days, and it's actually pretty good. I'll give it another few listens and talk about it in another video. But what I wanted to talk to you all about today was not really religion, but albums that I was taught as a child were satanic, bands that were satanic, and how I came to kind of discover that it was false, and how that happened, and kind of my journey through that. As a kid, my dad we were kind of lower middle class. My dad had a good job. My mom didn't have to work. And back in the late 70s, once things leveled out a little bit, things got a little better financially for a lot of folks. And private school was nowhere near as expensive as it is today. So I had some English comprehension issues as a kid. I still do. Sometimes it's hard for me to sit down and read something and comprehend what I just read. It's been an issue for pretty much my whole life. So my parents thought, in public school, he's not going to get that special one-on-one time that he needs. And back then, private school was kind of the way to go to get that one-on-one time. So my parents never have been overly religious. It was more about the education aspect of it. So the private school was a Christian school. I think there's a special term for it. It wasn't Catholic. It wasn't any other kind of religion. You didn't have to wear a uniform or anything like that, like a lot of kids do even today. It was more of if you wore a shirt, you had to tuck it in, you had to wear a belt, and things like that. They talked a lot about religion, mainly in like the sciences and social studies. Math was obviously, there was no religion interjected into that. But how this all ties back to music is every year they would have what they called a hard rock seminar. That was I don't know who put it on. I don't know if they bought it from another company, but they would put us all in the gym in these seats, and it took, I don't remember how long the seminar was, maybe 2 to 3 hours, but they would play a video up on if you've ever been in an old school, you have that stinky, grimy gym floor that used to double as like a basketball court, and then there would be a stage where plays and stuff would occur, and they would show this video. So as a young kid, I would watch these videos and think, oh shit, these are some evil folks. And it just made sense. You listen to these adults and you think, wow, these folks are trying to help me out and steer me in the right direction. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I started to figure things out. And I kind of wanted to share some of the albums that I own that they taught me were satanic, or not necessarily maybe satanic, but just evil, and if not evil, then just unwanted within the confines of that school. And that'll make a little bit more sense once I get more into it. But I want to talk about how I came to find that what they were teaching me and my friends was bullshit, for lack of a better term. Around 5th grade, I think, my parents had divorced, and I was kind of left to my own devices quite a bit. My mom had to go get a job. It was not an ideal situation, but I was what they call the latchkey kid. I was an only child. So I was kind of left to figure a lot of things out on my own, and some of that was diving into music. So I'm going to talk about some albums that they told us were satanic, and then my journey on how I figured out how they weren't. It was kind of an interesting thing for me. Hopefully, if someone else is struggling with this and you're younger, you figure things out. But The first band that they told me about is Judas Priest. This album was not mentioned in particular on the Hard Rock Seminar. This is Best of Judas Priest. This came out in the 80s, I think. But it has like Victim of Changes, Deceiver, The Ripper, Rock-a-Rolla on it. I was taught Judas Priest mainly because the name of the band were evil. Not necessarily satanic, but evil. This was before the whole backwards masking thing came out, where the couple kids committed suicide allegedly because they listened to a Judas Priest song and blew their brains out. We all know that was not true, but Judas Priest were one of the bands that I was taught growing up that, hey, that's bad stuff. You need to stay away from it. Another one, and hopefully this is education for some of you. Some of you older guys probably have heard of this stuff, but some of you younger guys may not know. But Kiss was another band on the list. Again, not this particular album. But when they showed an album cover with Kiss on it, as a young, impressionable 3rd grader, 4th grader, 5th grader, when someone tells you these guys are satanic, to me, you judge a book by its cover, and you look at Gene Simmons in particular, like, yeah, if anyone's the devil, that's him. We were also taught that Kiss stood for a couple different things. One was Knights in Satan's Service. Another one was Kids in Satan's Service, which we all know is bullshit. But again, as a 3rd grader, 4th grader, 5th grader with no internet, I didn't know any better. My parents didn't really pay much attention to these hard rock seminars. But yeah, we were taught that's what KISS, K-I-S-S, stood for. It wasn't just the band name. So that was another band they taught us was evil. And these aren't going to be any shock to any of you that these were the albums that were called out in that seminar. The granddaddy, or one of the granddaddies of them all, Number of the Beast, Iron Maiden, 666, The Number of the Beast, Sacrifice, you guys know the words, the albums, The Number of the Beast. Iron Maiden, I remember them. I remember this particular album cover being shown like, boom, like this is the evil stuff. You've got the devil there at the bottom. You got Evil Eddie there. What more needs to be said? Made sense to me, right? They're obviously devil worshippers. Stay away from Iron Maiden. The next one, I remember this album cover being shown as well, and this is how much of an impression it made on me. I'm 47. In 3rd, 4th grade, I would have been, 9? So 38 years later, and I still remember sitting there looking at the screen. Highway to Hell, AC/DC. A couple things about AC/DC. They taught us AC/DC stands for All Children Defy Christ. Not true. We were also taught about Bon Scott, and that he died because he was a devil worshipper, and because he was a devil worshipper, he was worshiping the devil, and threw up and choked on his own vomit and died because he was a devil worshipper. We all know he choked and died because he got shit-faced, drank too much alcohol poisoning, choking on your own vomit, etc. They didn't tell us that part of it. It was, he worships the devil, all children defy Christ, Highway to Hell. Who would question that as a 9-year-old? The next album, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story on how this album's kind of pivotal for me figuring out what I was taught was not 100% correct. So up through 5th grade, I went to private school, and when my parents were divorced, that obviously put a dent a little bit in the old pocketbook. My mom had to go back to work, etc. So they said, you know what? We're going to take you out of that private school and put you in a public school. There's a school bus that'll pick you up. For those who don't know, most private schools don't have school buses. Mine didn't. Your parents actually had to drive you there. You had to walk to school. So through that time, I started making friends with people in the neighborhood that went to public school. And there were about 3 or 4 of them that I befriended and became friends with, playing basketball, stuff around the neighborhood. And eventually we became pretty good friends, and my mom and dad weren't really around, and one of the guys, John Henson, was a great friend of mine. Said, hey, you want to come over to my house sometime, hang out, watch TV, whatever. I said, sure. I didn't really have to get permission from my mom because she really wasn't there, which was a good thing and a bad thing. But I remember going to John's house. He had 2 great parents, extremely friendly, 2 older sisters, extremely friendly, nice. And I walked into John's room, and he had a shelf very similar to a shelf I have over here. And I saw he had about, 20 to 25 records. And this one, which was one that I was taught was a band that was satanic. John had this album, Shout at the Devil by Motley Crue. I remember walking into his room and the instant feeling I felt of, oh my God, I'm in the house of a devil worshiper. But then I started to look at John and his family, and I'm like, do his parents know he worships the devil? Do his sisters know? Are they devil worshippers too? What's happening here in this house? And it sounds completely stupid now, but in the mind of I think by then I was in 6th grade. I was convinced John was a devil worshiper. But through John, I met some other folks. Kenny Pittman was one of the other folks, and I didn't listen to Motley Crue. John and I didn't really listen to music, but Kenny, one day on the way to school, he was in the seat in front of me on the bus, and he had a Walkman, and John said, "Hey, Matthew's my middle name. Long story. He's never listened to Motley Crue before, and Kenny's like, everyone knows Motley Crue. You've never listened to Motley Crue?" And I was like, no. And Theater of Pain had come out, and he said, well, check this out. And he gave me his headphones, and I was like, man, I don't know if I should do this or not. So I put the headphones on, and the song was queued up to Use It or Lose It from Theater of Pain. Not one of the more well-known tracks, but to this day it's one of my favorites, and I don't know if it's because it was my first exposure to Motley Crue, but I think it's a really catchy song. I listened to the lyrics, and I was like, well, there's nothing satanic about Use It or Lose It. I listened to a couple of the other songs. Home Sweet Home got popular, obviously. And as I started to hang out with these folks, I was going to John's house more and started listening to Motley Crue. Headbangers Ball was a big thing. MTV had this, I want to say it wasn't called Headbangers Ball, but it was like after school, like between 4 and 5 p.m. maybe, they would play metal videos, but it was more like butt rock, cock rock, whatever you want to call it. And that's when I discovered Rat. John had, I want to say he had Out of the Cellar for sure, dove headfirst and Out of the Cellar, and Rat wasn't on the list of the satanic bands, so I felt safe diving into that. But as I discovered music more and hung out with these other folks that listen to this music and these families, I was like, there's nothing satanic about these people. What am I missing? So as 6th grade went on, I discovered rap, break dancing, the whole 9 yards. I was knee deep in music. My parents would let me listen to like Thriller, and I'm trying to remember, my dad was a huge fan of Harry Chapin. Robert Palmer was big. I remember Dr. being blasted. So it was like, okay, my dad's listening to this music. My mom really wasn't into music too much. My friends are listening to music. What are all these people, just devil worshippers? I don't understand what's happening. So my mom and dad agreed to send me back to private school for 7th grade. My grades declined in 6th grade. I was just doing terrible in school. But I went back to the private school. I got to sit through another hard rock seminar. And boy, were my eyes opened wide during that. It was almost the exact same presentation. And I heard some of the stories about these bands, and as the videos were going, I'm like, that's a lie, nope, that's a lie. And it really opened my eyes to what they were trying to do. It was trying to scare kids into having better behaviors, and I think there's just better ways to do that than trying to scare people and tell them that music is satanic. So I kind of got the courage to ask a question. After the seminar, they had like a Q&A thing, and I had knew about this other band, and I said, so is it the music that's bad? Is it the lyrics? What about this makes it satanic? And they said, well, it's pretty much primarily the lyrics. And I said, well, what about this band, Stryper? They play some of the same type of music, but they have a lot of songs about, Jesus, soldiers under command, about being champions for God and Jesus. What about these guys? And you could tell they didn't really want to respond to Stryper. I don't think anyone in my school had heard Stryper. But John Henson's sister was somewhat religious, and she was trying to convince John to, if you like that heavy music, why don't you listen to Stryper? And they were like, well, if the lyrics are good, that's one thing, but the music is loud and aggressive, and we know Stryper has the long hair, so they're trying to be heavy metal, or hard rock, even though they have a positive message with their lyrics. We still don't condone this music, and it was actually, you would get kicked out of school if you brought a Stryper cassette. There were some other bands. Petra was one. Resurrection Band was another one that I was into. Was really into Res Band, for short. But those bands who were trying to relate to children and say, hey, here's music that's popular, we're going to try to relate to you, but spin it in a positive way. They didn't like that either. They hated it, to be honest. If you brought any of that other stuff to school, you'd be kicked out immediately. But even Stryper, Res Band, like I said, Petra, they would send you home, and you'd have to have a little talk with the principal and your parents about that. So after 7th grade, that was my last foray into private school, and it was public school ever since. But I tried to convince some of my friends about some of what they were learning, and they wanted no part of it. They thought I had been tainted by public school. I had been brainwashed by the other side, and that this was the way to go. I lost touch with a lot of those folks over the years, but hopefully they realized that some of what they were taught just really wasn't accurate, wasn't true. And to this day, I think about it and I just laugh, because you see what Motley Crue is, right? I mean, Christ, there's a Netflix documentary movie about them, and granted, they weren't Christians, obviously. So I think that the whole thing of the church trying to steer kids in a certain direction could be done without demonizing everything that's not religious. That's not a way to keep people, especially children, away from music. It's really a confusing thing when you're taught people that listen to this are going to hell. You're like, oh God, my dad's going to hell because he listened to Michael Jackson. My buddy John and his family are going to hell because he has a Motley Crue record. It didn't make sense. And yeah, it was just a weird time. I got out of it. I love metal to this day. I love music in general. It's just, I don't know if they still teach this kind of crap to kids in religious schools or not, but they really should kind of back off a little bit, in my opinion. So everything worked out. Here I am. I have money to spend on all the evil hard rock music I want, and I don't worship the devil, not yet, so we'll see. So that was my kind of journey and how I got started in hard rock and heavy metal, and the spark was Motley Crue for me, and I just dove headfirst into everything. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this little bit of a story rant. And if you're in religion and you have a different perspective on all this, let me know. I think it's a little different now. I think the 80s fundamental Christian sect that were so against hard rock really kind of gave Christianity a bad name, to be honest. There's a lot of great people in Christianity that listen to heavy metal. You can listen to heavy metal and still be a good person, and go to church and whatnot. I don't think that makes you a bad person. If that's the case, we're all doomed. So that was my story. Hope you enjoyed. If you have thoughts on all of this, let me know below. If you've experienced something similar, if you're younger and you're going to a private school or a religious school and they don't teach you any of this stuff anymore, let me know. I'd be happy to hear and listen what they actually teach people about music these days with all of the resources that we have now. You can't really lie to people anymore. You can do your own research. So thanks for watching, guys. Comment below with your thoughts, and I will catch you all very soon. Later.